Christmas morning, the living room floor. Track pieces laid end to end in an oval that takes up more space than anyone planned for. Two small plastic cars on a slot. A grown man on his knees making adjustments. He will later describe as helping the children. Scalextric was never entirely for the children. It was for the children and the dad simultaneously, in proportions that depended entirely on the dad. Here's what happened to it. Fred Francis was a toolmaker and inventor born in Hampstead in 1919, who had spent the war years running a precision engineering company in London and emerged from them with a practical turn of mind and a particular interest in making things move. In 1947, he founded Mini Models Limited and began producing tin plate toys. By 1952, he had a range called Scalex, toy racing cars with clockwork motors that you wound up by pulling out the steering wheel, and they became popular enough that the factory was producing more than 7,000 cars a week and had to move from London to a larger site in Avant, Hampshire, to keep up. Then the clockwork novelty wore off, as clockwork novelties do, and Francis went back to the problem. What he arrived at was a slotted rubber track with electric motors in the cars, powered by a simple controller that varied the current and therefore the speed. He called it Scalextric, which became Scalextric, and unveiled it at the Harrogate Toy Fair in January 1957. The response was immediate. The combination of real speed, competitive racing, and the glamour of Formula One, which Britain was dominating at the time, landed perfectly. The first two cars in the set were a Maserati 250F and a Ferrari 375, the same cars that Jim Clark and Sterling Moss were racing in actual Grand Prix at roughly the same time. And the connection between the toy on the living room floor and the real thing on the track at Goodwood was close enough to feel genuine. The factory struggled to keep up with orders. In 1958, Francis sold Mini Models to Lyons Brothers, who traded as Triang and understood immediately what they had acquired. In 1960, tin plate bodies were replaced with lighter plastic ones. The first plastic car was a Lotus 16, which was also the car winning races that season. The detail was getting better, the track was getting longer, and a set that cost the equivalent of around £115 in today's money was under Christmas trees across the country every December. The pattern that established itself through the 60s and 70s was this. Family buys the starter set, usually at Christmas, then they expand it. New straight sections, new curves, chicanes, bridges, pit lanes, all sold separately, all compatible, all tempting. A serious layout required the living room carpet to be rolled back and the furniture pushed to the sides, which happened regularly in households where Scalextric had taken hold, with a frequency that one family member found more reasonable than another. Licensing arrived early. In 1967, Lyons Brothers produced a set tied to the James Bond film Goldfinger, featuring an Aston Martin DB5, which is now rare and valuable, and was at the time an object of desire for approximately every British child and a significant number of their fathers. Knight Rider followed in the 80s. Batman, Back to the Future. The tie-in strategy understood what Scalextric actually was, not just a racing toy, but a way of owning something that had meaning beyond the track. The car in the set was the car from the film, or the race, or the television program. Racing it around a circuit in your living room was a form of participation in something larger. You were not just playing with a toy, you were racing at Goodwood, or outrunning the villain, and the circuit you had built yourself was the stage on which that happened. Here's something about Scalextric that people forget to mention. The building of the layout was itself an event, not just snapping the track together and putting the cars on. That was the quick version, the oval in the middle of the room that worked fine, but wasn't what anyone really wanted. The serious version involved planning, a sketch on paper, a mental map of how the track was going to run, which corners went where, whether there was room for the bridge section, how the chicane was going to connect to the back straight. It required knowing the pieces you had and improvising around the ones you didn't, and the finished layout was a physical object you had designed and built, one that occupied the room in a way that temporarily turned it into something else. A circuit, a venue with a name, if the household was serious enough. The racing happened somewhere you had constructed. That distinction mattered without anyone needing to say so. Several things happened through the 1980s and 90s that compounded in ways that made the Christmas floor layout feel, in retrospect, like a habit that required particular conditions to persist. The first was the computer. 1986 was the year Hornby Hobbies, which had acquired Scalextric through a management buyout in the early 80s, became a public company. And it was also the year the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64 were making serious, sustained claims on the leisure time of British children. For the first time, Scalextric had competition that appealed to the same age group and the same Christmas budget. A computer game offered something a slot car track did not. A changing experience, new levels, different challenges, the specific thrill of something that surprised you. The Scalextric layout, however large, was the same circuit in the same room every time. It required space, patience, and the willingness to get on the floor. The computer required a television and a joystick, and nothing else. Magnatraction arrived in 1988. It kept the cars on the track using magnets and genuinely improved the racing. It was not enough to change the direction of the competition. The second was the living room itself, the ambitious Scalextric layout, the kind that went around the perimeter of a room, over a bridge, through a tunnel, with lane change pieces and a proper lap counter, required a space that was dedicated to it, or at least available to be dedicated to it on a regular basis. As British homes became busier and the living room filled with more competing claims on its floor space, the home computer, the video recorder, the gaming console, the increasingly large television, the layout retreated. A serious track needed to be put up and taken down, which took time and damaged the car's connections. A layout left permanently up took over a room. The compromise was a modest oval assembled in 20 minutes and packed away after, which was not quite the thing the original experience had been. Not the layout, a reduced version of one. The third was the manufacturing shift. Fred Francis, the man who had invented the thing, died in 1998 at the age of 78. In the years immediately following, Scalextric production moved to China as the cost of manufacturing in the UK became uncompetitive. The cars that came back were accurate, detailed, and technically well made. They were not made in Havant, Hampshire, in a factory purpose-built for this specific product. The connection between the British toy and the British manufacturing tradition that had produced it was severed, quietly, as those connections tend to be. The cars still said Scalextric on the underside. They were made somewhere else, and yet something kept happening. The nostalgia economy that emerged in the 2000s and 10s brought Scalextric with it, because the people who had grown up with it on the living room floor in the 70s were now parents and grandparents with the budget to buy it again, and a specific memory of what it had meant. In 2009, James May used Scalextric track to recreate the Brooklyn circuit for a BBC television series, laying 2.95 miles of track with 350 volunteers and breaking the world record for the longest slot car track ever assembled. Think about that for a second. A grown man, several months, Scalextric track across the English countryside. The program barely needed to explain itself. In 2020, during the pandemic, Hornby reported a significant surge in sales as families looked for things to do together in the house. The floor got cleared again. The track came out. And the people doing it were not children discovering Scalextric for the first time. They were adults who had grown up with it and recognized, without quite articulating it, that what they were looking for was not just an activity but a specific kind of time. What Scalextric had always done that nothing else quite did, and this is the thing worth understanding, was require two people. Not in the way a board game requires two people, where you could technically play alone if you were desperate enough, in the way that the whole point of it was the other car in the other lane. The moment when you came out of a corner side by side and one of you pushed the trigger slightly harder and the other one flew off the track. The competition was physical and immediate and real. No algorithm determining the outcome, just the track, the car, the controller in your hand, and the other person next to you making the same decisions at the same time. The dad who laid the track on Christmas morning was not being selfish. He was making a space for exactly that kind of competition. Or, that is one way of reading it. The other way is that Scalextric was one of the few things in the toy box that genuinely worked for the adult and the child at the same time, in the same room, for the same reasons. The child wanted to race. The dad wanted to race. The track did not distinguish between them. And the controller in the hand of a 9-year-old and the controller in the hand of a 42-year-old produced the same result when the car went into the corner too fast, which is the car leaving the track and spinning to a halt against the skirting board, and everyone taking a moment before the next attempt. In February 2026, Hornby's parent company sold the Scalextric business to Purbeck Capital Partners for £20 million. The brand continues. The cars are detailed, the digital system allows up to 4 cars on a single lane, and the app-based controllers can log lap times and share race data. It is a technically more sophisticated product than anything Fred Francis put on the rubber track at Harrogate in 1957. Whether it produces the same specific experience. The floor cleared, the track laid in a shape that required negotiation about which direction the oval should go. The first lap at full speed that sent the car off at the first corner because you had not yet learned the circuit is a different question. Search for Scalextric tonight. The website is there. The sets are available, the cars are as detailed as they have ever been, and there is a digital system that would have seemed like science fiction to the kid who got the Goldfinger set in 1967. What you cannot search for is the smell of the power unit warming up, or the specific noise a car makes when it comes off the track and hits the skirting board, or the argument about whose turn it was to be the Ferrari. Those things are not on the website. They never were. Scalextric is still out there, in the toy shops, in the catalogues, in the attic boxes of people who kept the cars and lost the track. The living room floor, cleared for the occasion, the oval that never quite fitted the space available, the first lap at full speed before anyone had worked out the braking points. It was built on the idea that the best racing you could do was the racing you did 3 feet from the sofa, with someone you knew, on a track you had built yourself, in a room that belonged to you. It never needed to be more than that. Tell me in the comments, did you have Scalextric? What was the set? Who did you race? And did the dad ever actually let the children have a go? If you found this worth your time, subscribing helps me know there's interest in these topics.